Hello, my name is Jenny Morgan, and I'm from the Gitxsan First Nation and the Director for Indigenous Health at the BC Women's and Children's Hospitals. We work together to promote Indigenous cultural safety and practice while we close the gaps in healthcare that Indigenous peoples receive. We've identified an issue that we're concerned about.
To explain this issue, we need to tell you something about the genome. The genome is the name for all our DNA. It's the instructions that guide how our bodies grow and function, kind of like instructions for making the complex blanket that is each of us. Our genomes are the patterns, materials, and techniques that go into making these blankets. Our genomes get passed down to us from our parents, just like how our parents might teach us a tradition like blanket weaving. Our genomes are most similar to people from our ancestral groups, like how each region of the world has similar blankets made with their own weaving traditions. All of our genomes have normal changes that make us individuals, like how changes in a blanket make it unique. But sometimes a change can lead to a medical problem, like how a change in a blanket could lead to a mistake in a traditional pattern. We now have a test called genomic sequencing that looks at the whole genome all at once, checking the entire blanket for changes. It can diagnose many medical conditions, and sometimes it points to a treatment. GNOMAD is a database of genomes collected together from many healthy volunteers. It is a collaboration by many researchers from countries all around the world who hope to improve the diagnosis and management of genetic diseases. To understand genomic test results, doctors compare them to a database like GNOMAD. If they see a change in the database of healthy people, it's probably a normal change. If they don't see a change in the database, there are two possible reasons. Maybe the change causes a medical problem, or maybe the change is normal in certain ancestral groups, but the database doesn't have many people from those ancestries. Although GNOMAD contains 150,000 anonymous genomic sequences, most are of European ancestry, so GNOMAD does not reflect the world's diversity. Back to our blankets, people in warm climates might make lightweight cotton blankets and dye them bright colors that reflect their environment and culture. People in cold areas might make thick wool blankets with dark colors. If you're comparing a wool blanket to a group of cotton blankets, you might think it's not made properly because it's thick and the colors and patterns are different. But wool blankets are normal in cold climates, and the colors and patterns follow cultural traditions. They are perfect for what those groups need. By comparing the wool blanket to other wool blankets, you can see that its differences are normal variations. This is why it's really important that the database has genomes from healthy people with many different ancestries. If we compare it to genomes from just a few ancestries, we could accidentally think that a change causes problems, when it's actually a normal change. Current databases don't have many genomes from people of Indigenous ancestries, making it difficult to understand the results of Indigenous patients. This isn't just a problem for Indigenous peoples, though. There are many other ancestral groups that aren't well represented in the databases. Here is the story of one family who was affected by this problem.
Hi, my name is Tracy O, and I'm a genetic counselor. A few years ago, we saw an East Indian family whose son had some medical concerns. They were looking for a diagnosis, and so genomic testing was done. We did find a change in the DNA, but it was a change that we hadn't seen before. So we went to the database to see, one, are there individuals with medical problems who had the same change, and or were there healthy individuals, particularly from the same ethnic group, who had that change. But unfortunately, we weren't able to find either. So we had to go to the family and say, we found a change, but we don't know what it means. And that was actually really hard for the family to have that degree of uncertainty. But recently, we were able to go back to the database, and more genomes of East Indian ancestry have been loaded, and we were able to see that, in fact, this change is common in healthy individuals of that ethnic background. So we were able to go back to the family and say, we've got more information now. We see that this change is actually common in healthy individuals of your ethnic background, and so this change is probably not something that your son has to worry about, and that is really great for the family.
We've held sharing circles to listen to Indigenous peoples' thoughts, considerations, and concerns about the issue. Here are some quotes that summarize the findings. The following quotes are from our 4 sharing circle focus groups held in the Vancouver, BC area in 2017 and 2018. Voices and names may have been changed to protect the privacy of participants. Systemic racism. This theme came up repeatedly and overlapped with many other themes. This included past abuses, current racial discrimination, equity, and human rights.
But I guess I find it so shocking that there isn't a single First Nations DNA sequence in the system. I find that so crazy.
I always feel that there's a step missing because First Nations people don't have access to health. Not the way that the general population has, mainly due to still discrimination against them. So
going in and doing something like this is probably not on our radar, considering that we are facing really poor conditions in communities.
Lack of trust. This theme overlapped significantly with systemic racism. Participants talked about the mistrust many Indigenous peoples may feel contributing to a potential database.
There's so much distrust in not just the health, but education and just trust within society. So everyone's asking for trust back, but there isn't really the effort to build that trust.
One roadblock I see is that there is a general mistrust of any physicians or doctors or institutions.
I guess my concern would be that it would just be another research project taken, and you know what I mean? It's just
an experiment,
yeah.
Why the heck should I help you? You never helped me. You're just here to take one more thing from me. So in the North, they're pretty fed up with scientists. They're pretty fed up with doctors. And so you're really not here to help me. You're only here to help yourself. So you're going to be facing a lot of animosity. So how do you get that circle? How do you reduce that animosity?
We learned a lot about the experimentation that they did on Aboriginal people throughout the residential school system. So a lot of my skepticism comes from knowing what occurred during the residential school system. And it was all to work against us. Yeah, it comes back to the trust.
What you're doing here is awesome because you're actually asking us before you just do it. You would just go, oh, you're going to donate blood, then you'd secretly do another test or add it to your database and not even tell them. Like women being sterilized, they go in for an operation for this, but they actually, oh, we're going to sterilize this person. Secretly done, but if you're up front and open about stuff.
A lot of things have happened to First Nations people where one thing was said and then another thing was done. So.
Building trust. Most participants felt that having Indigenous genomes in a database would be beneficial and suggested ways to build the necessary trust.
Maybe I would say express your own knowledge of their fears acknowledge
Go through
the past, the history, the residential school system, like acknowledge why they may be fearful and distressful, and then just let them know that maybe that isn't the case. Like, we understand what has happened, we understand why we may be fearful, but this is beneficial.
And emphasize it's not government related, totally detached from any government authority body.
I think it's like when you're dealing with people who have been colonized, a large percent of them are dealing with trauma. And so I think that recognizing that is really important. But I think that amongst the people that are traumatized, there are also a percentage that do want to help and do want to contribute and do want to, learn about these projects. And so I guess it's finding those people as well.
Go to the elders, go to the community. Indigenous communities, reserves. Have a talking circle like this, and having the elders there who knows about health, that knows about our well-being. And
I would want to see other Aboriginal people at these higher levels who would directly be involved in the research study, like Dr. Evan Adams. Like, I would want to see Native people who know this stuff.
I would have to say that people who understand, like, Indigenous culture, where we come from, and just an understanding of our history and why there is distrust and how they can approach it. It's a part of us. It's more than science.
And I think having Indigenous representation really helps. Because then that works with lessening the barrier of the fear of institutions and that kind of thing.
Reciprocity. What benefits should come from a database for donors, families, Indigenous communities, Canada as a whole?
So it makes me question, like, say if I were asked to volunteer and to give my sequencing, what benefits would I get from this? Like, what is the outcome of getting thousands of Indigenous people to give their blood or whatever to this project? What is the end goal?
And what do you think would entice people?
Well, money
to donate?
always or maybe
incentives.
They feel like they've got a right to be paid.
that's right.
Yeah.
find out your health problems faster or determine if you're healthier.
I would love it if we had our own genome, because I'm looking at the long term. I'm looking at my grandchildren and my great grandchildren.
I'm wondering if this will help get faster diagnosis and, get our people treated the same as the general population.
And if, like, a child, especially children who experience kidney diseases or diabetes, if they were from my nation, I would want to help.
It's not just to help our children. I look at it this way: if I can help a kid with a kidney on that same blood type, I'm giving life to that kid. I don't look at it as a race or a different creed. You're giving life to give that kid a chance. Whether it's related to genetically or not, you look at it this way.
I think the database is a great idea. If it could save or, enhance the quality of any children's or adults' lives, and we have the technology to do it,
So
then I think it's a good idea.
So I think if us, as an Aboriginal group and people of Canada, Aboriginal people could do the work, they should collect the information and they should control the information. We need to have some right and some say.
Leg the standard.
We need to have some resemblance of control.
I say yes, but I agree with her that there should be Aboriginal people involved to do it.
Structure. Should there be a separate Indigenous database, or should Indigenous genomes be added to existing international databases? How should the database be controlled?
Is this a database that's kept separate? Or is it with the rest of the world?
And why would it be any different for us?
I think it should be separate.
Why would somebody international be interested in our DNA?
Because people don't stay at home anymore. I mean, there might be somebody who needs that information that lives in Romania.
But I would think that if somebody traveled internationally, okay? If I traveled internationally and I got sick, say like in Spain, and they knew I had Aboriginal ancestry, they could automatically come right back to Canada, get the database information from Canada.
What if you didn't want to, when you go to the doctor or the hospital or whatever, and you don't want to fill out the ancestry part? It's none of your business what I am.
Yeah.
Treat me, I'm a person.
Yeah.
So how do they know which database to look at? And then how do you distinguish if he's giving you treatment that he would give everybody else, or he's treating you differently because you're Aboriginal or whatever?
What if a person is biracial?
Each of our family situation is different, and my children are not full Indigenous like myself. I think that we all go into the big general one, and that it will really sort itself out. And like saying when I'm not here and my great-grandchild has something wrong and they try to look, and so they look in the database and that it's there from both sides.
Yeah. No. So is Canada going to contribute our information to the Americans, or are you going to keep it housed here in Canada? I tend to agree with you. Keep it here in Canada.
Before colonization happened, we traveled. There were very few boundaries. Now we have these U.S.-Canadian boundaries. So, like the genetic makeup for people who are post-Salish, it's not limited by the Canadian boundary. And when they're asking the question, who should have control? I don't know if that's the right question to ask, because it brings up us and them kind of dynamic. Whereas when we're trying to talk about something like what the United Nations, like a we, we're trying to talk about a we database, not a us and them. So
we need to have something that we can say is ours. We're probably never going to say no to anyone that wants the help or wants the information. But we need to have more control. This is us.
To restrict the flow of what gets
us collecting the information, us maintaining the information. Because this realistically, this is us giving another piece of us away. That's the way I see it.
Management. What provisions need to be in place? How can the database be used? Who owns the samples?
We want to make sure the information is confidential, is not going to be sold to anybody, that it's being kept, like vault, like in a bank vault. I don't want to find out, oh, we lost 100,000 names, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're divided on whether it should link back to you or not? Maybe if it helps you.
And just guaranteeing that the data is not going to be used to be sold to insurance companies to exclude you from getting benefits.
Because then you're attached to that, and then so if you apply for a job and it's somehow they get that information and you're predisposed to mental health issues or whatever, then they don't want to hire you.
Who do you think should have access to this bank of DNA?
Physicians.
Genetic specialists, more. Genetic specialists. What about private industry?
Nope.
No.
Oh, unless it's private research industry. But then they might try and sell you things. I don't know.
Shouldn't go to private companies.
Hands down, no. The pharmaceutical industry is in direct conflict with Aboriginal traditional healing values.
I just want to ask what sample you're taking. Is it going to be blood, just a swab, or what? I know there's a lot of nations that don't want their blood taken away, and if it is, they want it returned.
Okay, realistically, if you really think about this from an ancestral perspective, you're asking us to give away bits and pieces of our ancestors. Because our ancestors are in our DNA. That's from an Aboriginal perspective, because our ancestors live within us.
Implementation practicalities. Who needs to be consulted for a database? Who is likely to participate? How and where can they be reached? What will the process look like?
I don't think we can speak for everyone in Canada. We can't.
No. We're only a small bunch of people. It takes a lot more people to make a yes.
And as long as it's done in the right way, I don't see any problems with it. So consulting with, Band Council, consulting with First Nation Health Authority, providing, information to the people that you're going to be taking these samples from. Just having really good layout of information, consequences, benefits, and then providing, updates about what's going on with this, like where you are at, how close you are to completing this database, and then providing anecdotes of, times it's been successful in Indigenous populations.
I think too that you still need to go through the Band Council so that they can, tell them that it's okay, we approve this, if you want to participate, please do.
Okay, so what happens if the elder convinces everybody not to do it? I mean, I guess it's still to each their own.
They're not going to trust you more than they trust the elder that they've known for however long.
So if you were in charge and you were your project was to collect DNA from Indigenous people for this data bank, how would you get started?
We speak a lot about community engagement, and when you want to go and plan for a community, you should go in and learn from the community. So first, start to not just try and educate right away, but to learn from them. What are some of the barriers to this process?
And make a Facebook campaign. With a video like that. Get people to share it on YouTube. And I think the younger people are more interested in technology and all this kind of thing. You can also try and go to university like UBC, and there's a huge department. And most people that take those courses are part Aboriginal. And they can also announce it in their class. I know doctor's office too, I think would be, people are thinking about health and stuff there.
I just recently became a blood donor, and while registering to become a blood donor, they also offered me registration to become a stem cell donor as well, which is separate, because again the Indigenous population is very small. I think it's only 1%. They have only 1% of Indigenous stem cell donors in Canada. So then they were sort of encouraging Indigenous people to register. So could it possibly be piggybacked off of something like that?
Make it a story. When people have donated, make sure they include it in this as a success story. We found the answer to this one, but letting them know that they contributed, that what they donated did contribute to a positive result. Making it personal and acknowledging where Indigenous people are coming from will create that trust that you need.
I need more information, and I need to go away and think about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Because this is big.
These sharing circles were done to start a conversation on the issue. We're hoping that these conversations will lead to larger discussions in Indigenous communities across BC and Canada. Thank you for watching.